guys. This is another installment of The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and we are reading section 5 called The Breaking of the One into the Manifold. The forward roll of the Cosmogonic round precipitates the one into the many. Herewith a great crisis, a rift splits the created world into two apparently contradictory planes of being. In the Peori's chart, the people emerge from the lower darknesses and immediately go to work to elevate the sky. They are revealed as moving with an apparent independence. They hold councils, they decide, they plan, they take over the work of arranging the world. Yet we know that behind the scenes the unmoved mover is at work like a puppet master. In mythology, wherever the unmoved mover, the mighty living one, holds the center of attention, there is a miraculous spontaneity about the shaping of the universe. The elements condense and move into place on their own accord or at the Creator's slightest word. The portions of the self-shattering cosmic egg go to their stations without aid, but when the perspective shifts to focus on living beings, when the panorama of space and nature is faced from the standpoint of the personages ordained to inhabit it, then a sudden transformation overshadows the cosmic scene. No longer do the forms of the world appear to move in the patterns of a living, growing, harmonious thing, but stand recalcitrant or, at best, inert. The props of the universal stage have to be adjusted. Even beaten into shape, the earth brings forth thorns and thistles. Man eats bread in the sweat of his brow. Two modes of myth therefore confront us. According to one, the demiurgic forces continue to operate of themselves. According to the other, they give up the initiative and even set themselves against the further progress of the cosmogonic round. The difficulties represented in this latter form of myth begin even as early as during the darkness of the original creature begetting embrace of the cosmic parents. Let the Maoris introduce us to this terrible theme. Rangi, the sky god, lay close on the belly of Papa, Earth Mother, that the children could not break free from the womb. They were in an unstable condition, floating about the world of darkness, and this was their appearance. Some were crawling, some were upright with arms held up, some lying on their sides and some on their backs. Some were stooping and some with their heads bent down, some with their legs drawn up and some kneeling, some feeling about in the dark. They were all within the embrace of Rangi and Papa. At last the beings who had been begotten by heaven and earth, worn out by the continued darkness, consulted amongst themselves, saying, "Let us now determine what we should do with Rangi and Papa, whether it would be better to slay them or to rend them apart." Then spoke Tumatuanga, the fiercest of the children of heaven and earth. "It is well, let us slay them." Then spake Tain Muhata, the father of the forests and all things that inhabit them, or that are constructed from trees. "Nay, not so. It is better to rend the furious as to rend your parents apart. But Dane Mahuta pauses not, he regards not their shrieks and cries. Far, far beneath him he presses down the earth, far, far above him he thrusts up the sky. As known to the Greeks, this strong story is rendered by Hesiod in his account of the separation of Uranus, Father Heaven, from Gaia, Mother Earth. According to his variant, the Titan Kronos castrated his father with a sickle and pushed him up out of the way. In Egyptian iconography, the position of the cosmic couple is inverted. The sky is the mother and the father is the vitality of the earth. But the pattern of the myth remains. The two were pushed asunder by their child, the air god Shu. Again, the image comes to us from the ancient cuneiform texts of the Sumerians, dating from the 3rd and 4th millenniums BC. First was the primeval ocean. The primeval ocean generated the cosmic mountain, which consisted of heaven and earth united. On, the heaven father, and Ki, the earth mother, produced Enlil, the air god, who presently separated On from Ki and then himself united with his mother to beget mankind. But if these deeds of the desperate children seem violent, they are as nothing compared with the total carving up of the parent power which we discover recorded in the Icelandic Eddas and in the Babylonian tablets of creation. The final insult here is given in the characterization of the demiurgic presence of the abyss as evil, dark, obscene. The bright young warrior sons now disdaining the generative source, the personage of the seed state of deep sleep summarily slay it, hack it, slice it into lengths, and carpenter it into the structure of the world. This is the pattern for victory of all of our later slayings of the dragon, the beginning of the age-long history of the deeds of the hero. According to the Edic account, after the yawning gap had given forth in the north a mist world of gold, in the south a region of fire, and after the heat from the south had played on the rivers of ice that crowded down from the north, a yeasty venom began to be exuded. From this a drizzle arose, which in turn congealed to rime. The rime melted and dripped. Life was quickened from the drippings in the form of a torpid, gigantic, hermaphroditic, horizontal figure named Ymir. The giant slept, and as it slept it sweated. One of its feet begat with the other a son, while under its left hand germinated a man and wife. The rime continually melted and dripped, and there condensed from it a cow, Adumaya. From her under flowed 4 streams of milk, which were drunk for nourishment by Ymir. But the cow, for her own nourishment, licked the ice blocks, which were salty. The evening of the first day she licked, and a man's hair came forth from the blocks. The second day a man's head, and the third the entire man was there, and his name was Buri. Now Buri had a son named Bor, who married one of the giant daughters of the creatures that had sprung from Ymir. She gave birth to the trinity of Othin, Vili, and Ve, and these then slaughtered sleeping Ymir and carved the body into chunks. Of Ymir's flesh the earth was fashioned, and of his sweat the sea, crags of his bones, trees of his hair, and of his skull the sky. Then of his bones the blithe gods made Misgard for sons of men, and of his brain the bitter-mooded clouds were all created. In the Babylonian version, the hero is Marduk, the sun god. The victim is Tiamat, terrifying dragon-like, attended by swarms of demons, a female personification of the original abyss itself. Chaos as the mother of the gods, but now the menace of the world. With bow and trident, club and net, the convoy of battle winds the god mounted his chariot. The 4 horses trained to trample underfoot were flecked with foam. But thyself on high, and thy heart hath promised thee a call to battle, and against the gods my fathers thou hast contrived thy wicked plan. Let then thy host be equipped, let thy weapons be girded on, stand I and thou, let us join battle. When Tiamat heard these words, she was like one possessed, she lost her reason. Tiamat uttered wild, piercing cries, she trembled and shook to her very foundations. She recited an incantation, she pronounced her spell, and the gods of the battle cried out for their weapons. Then advanced Tiamat and Marduk, the counselor of the gods. To the fight they came on, to the battle they drew nigh. The Lord spread out his net and caught her, and the evil wind that was behind him he let loose in her face. The terrible winds filled her belly, and her courage was taken from her, and her mouth she opened wide. He seized the trident and burst her belly. He severed her inward parts. He pierced her heart. He overcame her and cut off her life. He cast down her body and stood upon it. Having then subdued the remainder of her swarming host, the god of Babylon returned to the mother of the world. And the Lord stood upon Tiamat's hinder parts, and with his merciless club he smashed her skull. He cut through the channels of her blood, and he made the north wind bear it away into secret places. Then the Lord rested, gazing upon her dead body, and devised a cunning plan. He split her up like a flat fish into two halves. One half of her he stabilized as a covering for heaven. He fixed a bolt, he stationed a watchman, and bade them not to let her waters come forth. He passed through the heavens, he surveyed the regions thereof, and over against the deep he set the dwelling of Nudamud, and the Lord measured the structure of the deep. Marduk in this heroic manner pushed back with the ceiling the waters above, and with the floor the waters beneath. Then in the world between he created man. The myths never tire of illustrating the point that conflict in the created world is not what it seems. Tiamat, though slain and dismembered, was not thereby undone. Had the battle been viewed from another angle, the chaos monster would have been seen to shatter of her own accord, and her fragments move into their respective stations. Marduk and his whole generation of divinities were but particles of her substance. From the standpoint of these created forms, all seemed accomplished, as by a mighty arm amid danger and pain. But from the center of the emanating presence, the flesh was yielded willingly, and the hand that carved it was ultimately no more than an agent of the will of the victim herself. Herein lies the basic paradox of myth, the paradox of the dual focus. Just as the opening of the cosmogonic cycle, it was possible to say God is not involved, but at the same time God is creator, preserver, destroyer. So now at this critical juncture where the one breaks into the many, destiny happens, but at the same time is brought about. From the perspective of the source, the world is a majestic harmony of forms, pouring into being, exploding and dissolving. But what the swiftly passing creatures experience is a terrible cacophony of battle cries and pain. The myths do not deny this agony. They reveal within, behind, and around it essential peace. The chief of the perspective from the repose of the central cause to the tribulation of the peripheral effects is represented in the fall of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. They ate of the forbidden fruit, and the eyes of them both were opened. The bliss of paradise was closed to them, and they beheld the created field from the other side of a transforming veil. Henceforth they should experience the inevitable as they are to gain. And we'll just go ahead and read the sixth section. It's called Folk Stories of Creation. The simplicity of the origin stories of the undeveloped folk must die, that they may always be sorry for each other. The woman threw the stone into the water, and it sank. There, said Old Man, you have chosen. There will be an end to them. The arranging of the world and the creation of man and the decision about death are typical themes from the tales of primitive creator. It is difficult to know how seriously or in what sense these stories were believed. The mythological mode is one not so much of direct as of oblique reference. It is as if Old Man had done so and so. Many of the tales that appear in the collection of the Platonic archetype of the shark is implied in the curious logic of final dialogue. Many of the tales that appear in the collections under the category of origin stories were certainly regarded more as popular fairy tales than as a book of Genesis. Such playful mythologizing is common in all civilizations, higher as well as lower. The simpler members of the populations may regard the resultant images with undue seriousness, but in the main they cannot be said to represent doctrine or the local myth. The Maoris, for example, from whom we have some of our finest cosmogonies, have the story of an egg dropped by a bird into the primeval sea. It burst, and out came a man, a woman, a boy, and a girl, a pig, a dog, and a canoe. All got into the canoe and drifted to New Zealand. This clearly is a burlesque of the cosmic egg. On the other hand, the Kamchatkans declare apparently in all seriousness that God inhabited heaven originally, but then descended to earth. When he traveled about on his snowshoes, the new ground yielded under him like thin and pliant ice. The land had been uneven ever since. Or again, according to the Central Asiatic Kyrgyz, when two early people tended a great ox had been without drink for a very long time, and were nearly dead of thirst, and the animal got water for them by ripping open the ground with his big horns. That is how the lakes in the country of the Kyrgyz were made. A clown figure working in continuous opposition to the well-wishing creator very often appears in myth and folk tale, as accounting for the ills and difficulties of existence this side of the veil. The Melanesians of New Britain tell of an obscure being, the one who was first there, who drew two male figures on the ground, scratched open his own skin and sprinkled the drawings with his blood. He plucked two large leaves and covered the figures, which became, after a while, two men. The names of the men were Tukabanana and Tukarfufu. Tukabanana went off alone, climbed a coconut tree that had light yellow nuts, picked two that were still unripe, and threw them to the ground. They broke and became two handsome women. Tukarfufu admired the women and asked how his brother had come by them. Climb a coconut tree, Tukarbana said. Pick two unripe nuts and throw them to the ground. But Tukarfufu threw the nuts point downward, and the women who came from them had flat, ugly noses. One day Tukarbana carved a thumbfish out of wood and let it swim off into the ocean so that it could be a living fish forever. Now this thumbfish drove the Melivarian fish to the shore, where Tukarbana simply gathered them up from the beach. Tukarfufu admired the thumbfish and wanted to make one, but when he was taught how, he carved a shark instead. This shark ate the Melivarian fish instead of driving them to the shore. Tukarfufu, crying, went to his brother and said, I wish I had not made that fish. He does nothing but eat up all the others. What sort of fish is it? He was asked. Well, he answered, I made a shark. You really are a disgusting fellow, his brother said. Now you have fixed it so that our mortal descendants shall suffer. That fish of yours will eat up all the others, and people too. Behind his foolishness it is possible to see that the one cause, the obscure being who got himself, yields within the as good and evil. The story is not as naive as it appears. Furthermore, the metaphysical pre-existence of the Platonic archetype of the shark is implied in the curious logic of the final dialogue. This is a conception inherent in every myth. Universal too is the casting of the antagonist, the representative of evil, in the role of the clown. Devils, both the lusty thickheads and the sharp, clever deceivers, are always clowns, though they may triumph in the world of space and time. Both they and their work simply disappear. When the perspective shifts to the transcendental, they are the mistakes of shadow for substance. They symbolize the inevitable imperfections of the realm of shadow, and so long as we remain, this side of the veil cannot be done away. The black Tatars of Siberia say that when the black Tartars of Siberia say that when the demiurge Bajana fashioned the first human beings, he found that he was unable to produce a life-giving spirit for them, so he had to go up to heaven and produce souls from Kudai, the high god.